This is Adapt, the community podcast. Before today's episode gets started, I just wanted to have a quick disclaimer stating that I am speaking from my own experiences, and I understand that everyone's experiences throughout life are slightly different, but these are mine, and this is how I look at things. And also, I do discuss my disability and how I understand it. I am not a medical professional or even close to one, so I try my best. It's not perfect, though, and I do realize that. Thanks. I hope you enjoy today's episode. This is Adaptive, the community podcast, and I am your host, Sam White. This is the very first episode ever. Yay! And I just wanted for this first episode to introduce myself. In future episodes, I look forward to interviewing and getting to know others within the community and those that I have gotten to know over the years in the community, having fun conversations about the community and what they do and their experiences. But for today's first episode, I thought it would be great just to kind of sit down and let you know who Sam is and why Sam chose to start this podcast. All right. So I'm just going to start at the beginning and kind of tell you a little bit about myself. I was born with cerebral palsy, which is a physical disability. Starts in the brain. It affects muscle control. Like many different diagnoses and disabilities, it affects everyone a little differently. And so for me, it is mainly just my lower extremities, I guess would be the right word. So I don't have many symptoms up in with my fingers, my hands. My fine motor skills aren't great, but that is part of it. Like, fine motor skills aren't great. But the most noticeable part of my disability right now, or it doesn't change, it doesn't progress to get worse. So the most noticeable part would be the way that I walk and the effect that it has on my muscles in my lower extremities or my legs. And throughout my childhood, I did kind of have times where I was unsure how the world would interact with me. And did I ever have like one negative experience that stands out? Not necessarily, but did little things just start to build and build and build? Yes. Just kind of watching the way that people interact with me and the way that others kind of looked at me. It had an effect on me, and it took me a long time to kind of accept my disability, and I would say that process was happening through my high school, my high school years. And towards the end of my high school years, I was able to start to figure out some of my learning disability challenges, and that really was like empowering to me. And I really just found, a way to look at my learning disabilities and the challenges I had in the classroom in a different way with the assistance of an amazing teacher. I guess an amazing team of teachers. It was quite the team that helped me figure a lot of this out. And so for that, I thank them, and they know who they are. And then, I was still like challenged with the perception of, I was still challenging kind of the idea of the perception that people had of me, if that makes sense. And it got me down several times. And so right out of high school, I started a job that just really wasn't the best environment. I had applied for jobs all throughout high school and just never really gotten anything. I never got callbacks from these places. And I didn't consistently, I wasn't consistently applying. It was like I would get these little bursts to be like, okay, I want to get into the work field, the working field at the time. And the workforce, not the work field. I would still come across, and I got, shortly after I graduated high school, I started working with some people, and I was starting to get interviews, but I was noticing the interactions with people and just kind of throwing them to the back of my head. And then I got put in this situation that wasn't so good. And I'm not going to name drop the company, even though I do not think that people should shop at this specific store for how awfully the management team treated me there. I felt very tokenized at that time. They were like, yeah, we do hire disabled people. Look at Sam. And there were other things and things that they just wouldn't let me do in the store that I could have done, and I could have operated like a normal employee. And at the same time, I was going to community college I just knocked my water bottle. I was going to community college to get a degree in graphic design and video production. And throughout that, I started to work at the community college, and I was able to quit this job that I wasn't being treated very well at. And I really found a passion for helping others, which has kind of always been there. I think this job where I was able to help students and kind of assist people and pointing them in the right direction, it really helped me realize that I want to do something to help individuals throughout. So I had these thoughts just pop back into my head, and I was starting to get into adaptive rock climbing around this same time, which you will hear more about in this podcast, as it's a huge passion of mine. Adaptive sports as a whole is a huge passion of mine. So, in my childhood, I was in a program out in the East Coast that did a lot with adaptive sports and stuff. So I'm hoping to bring some of those stories forward on this podcast and talk about that. I'm really just wanting to open up this conversation of the adaptive community throughout this podcast. Kind of going back to where I was in my story, I was at this job, and I was having these recurring thoughts of my experience kind of figuring out my own learning disability and the, the trials that we went through, and I really enjoyed that time. Like when I look back in high school, I did a lot in high school. I was part of the theater program. I did a lot, I was involved. But those last couple years, I would say that last year and a half, where I was looking forward and trying to figure out my personal learning challenges, that I really looked back on that with fondness, and I always loved to problem solve. So that brings me to kind of where I am today. I am attending a university for special education, majoring in special education, K-12 teaching. So I will be a special education teacher here in the next few years, and I'm looking forward to it. But along with that, it doesn't just stop for me in the classroom. I want to, like I've mentioned a couple times in this story, I really want to change, the perception that society, or, I can't change it by myself, but I want to start to change the perception that society has about the disabled community, the adaptive community, as there are really cool stories and really cool people and really cool things going on in this community that gets overlooked and sometimes devalued or undervalued. So I want to bring this to the forefront and really explore what it means to be disabled in the modern era. And, because even when you look at the parking lots and the signs, you're seeing this wheelchair that looks very, static, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And I just don't believe that, most of the people in this community are just static. I know so many people that, in spite of being disabled, have done amazing things and really taken their disability and adapted life in stride with what they wanted to do. And so that was the end goal of this podcast, is to share that, the amazing part that I see. This community tends to get overlooked sometimes, and having these conversations on this podcast, I really hope could, maybe even if it was just one person, kind of change their perception and have that realization that disabled individuals, people in the adaptive community, are just like you, or are just like an able-bodied individual. Because I think, although there are amazing people that do realize that in the world, there are so many more that could realize that. And so bringing forward these ideas and these stories, these experiences throughout these conversations, and we really turn this into talking about the community. And I think it could be a really good thing, and I'm looking forward to talking to people and having these conversations throughout. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. It was the very first one. It was not perfect. It was really just kind of a brain dump of my story, and I just wanted to kind of give you a idea of who I am. But that's kind of a good thing, I see. I see it as a good thing because it's going to be laid back. It's going to be me stumbling over my words. That's just who I am. I tend to, I'm very casual about things sometimes, and I stumble over words. I stop thinking, or stop talking while I think. So it's authentically me, even though it wasn't perfect, and we want to get better as I move through these podcasts. Thank you for listening today and getting through. Come back on Friday, the 29th of January, 2021, is when the next episode will drop. And this is a amazing conversation I was able to have with a really good friend of mine about her experience. And it was a great conversation we had. So I hope you come back, listen to that, and continue to enjoy. You can pick this up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I believe we are distributed out pretty wide. So pick it up wherever you like to listen, and I will see you next week. Thanks again for listening. Have a great week. This is Adapt, the community podcast.